Hey, everyone.
I haven't. I did see Dave. I see Julie.
Turn on the tables.
Oh, more and more people. There's Glenn. Looking forward to meeting.
Maurizio can't come. Well, it's 9:01. I'm going to kick it off. Welcome, everyone. I'm calling the meeting of the Committee for Family Forestlands to order. Thank you all for being here. I want to give a special welcome to Becca Shively, who's from Sustainable Northwest, our conservation member here, who's here, I think, for the first time. And let's see, for our first item is review of the agenda. I have one comment, which is we had hoped to get on the agenda for this time or sometime soon, a discussion of the tax credit incentive under the private forest accord and the degree to which that is being utilized or not being utilized and why, and possible alternatives if there were good other ways to encourage that kind of better buffers. But we couldn't get someone to talk for this meeting, so we'll push that forward to hopefully having something from the department on that at our next meeting. Are there any other comments on the agenda for this meeting or other topic ideas? Seeing none, we'll go to roll call. If Heather could do that, that'd be great.
Amanda Sullivan Astor, Becca Shively. She's here on video. Dave Bugney,
Present by video.
Gary Jensen, Glenn Ahrens,
Here by video.
Jake Ryan, Julie
as well.
Julie Woodward,
You're online.
Kate McMichael here, Maurizio Valerio, Mike Caffaretta, and Wendy Gerlach.
Here in person. Thank you. The prior meeting summary was sent around. Now's the time to make comments on that, if you have any. No comments seen. We'll assume that is okay as it currently is. Public comment. If there are any members of the public that would like to hop on and introduce yourself or make comments, now's the time for that.
My name's Teresa Hauser. I'm a member of the public.
Thank you.
Just one other introduction. We have Tim Holschbach. He's the interim deputy state forester.
Thanks. The next item is chair updates. I don't have any particular chair updates to make, except we have a conversation this meeting about succession because I only have 2 meetings left, I think, as a member of the committee and as chair because you term off after 2 terms or the end of my term. So that's one chair comment. Other than that, I don't have any specific comments, although I think will be an interesting meeting, both in terms of discussion of what's going on with the private forest accord and then yeah, some funding and budget issues we can talk about. That's it for me, and I will hand it over to Mike Kroon.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's been a while, so I had to go back through all my notes. I think it was October. It was the last time we met or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
So I went back and found a few notes, both from interim state forester Kate Skinner and myself. And so there's a few pieces I'm pulling out here. Just kind of update you on a few things. I'll talk about the state forester hiring and the budget here in a little bit, but a few other things I just wanted to let you know that may affect small women owners. So just be aware of that. In October, the governor issued an executive order number 2526. What it is, I'm not going to go into the details of what it is, but it's meant to minimize impacts and help Oregon's natural working lands and waters adapt to changing climate. ODF is not the agency's tasked with pulling that together. That is DEQ and BFW, I believe. BFW and NOAA. I'm sorry. They will be, so be the lead agencies on that, but we will be participating in that in whatever form it takes on that. This will, the executive order goes beyond, goes across all of our programs, including this 20-year strategy that we've put in place. And those, we have 13 programs on a 20-year strategy within the agency. So we will be participating in that with those two agencies to get them the information they need on that. So anyway, I just want to make sure everybody had heard about that executive order and what it's going to do across the state for the agency.
Mike, what was the order number?
Number 25-27. And
Actually, can I clarify? Because it was like making, is it 10% improvements of something over 10 years, if I remember, is that one?
yeah, for the baseline of 2020, year 2025.
So did I hear you correctly that it doesn't, that because ODF has so many things that are already in place, that it doesn't really impact ODF programs, or it still does?
Yeah, so there's, the baseline is one of the things that OWEB and ODF and W are working through, as well as the resiliency definition and the metrics associated with that. That's going to feed into what the 10% over 10 years details out as. So things that we had in, not programs, but actions. So actions that we, with 2025. So anything we're doing or moving forward with in 2026 and forward will come towards that 10% over 10 years plan. So thinking about items like the state forest HCP, that's a conservation action that we're anticipating for this summer. That type of stuff will work towards that. So we're working I believe there's a dozen state agencies associated with that order. The goal right now is to work on co-benefit was in there in the top end of the order quite a bit. And that they're focusing right on that, where agencies work more streamlined together for more efficiencies. And also resilience was a very broad term in there. And it also had a sense of community resilience was also in there as well. So this is paired with a few other executive orders around just the resiliency across a couple of different sectors.
More to come.
Okay.
More to come. Yeah.
More.
Good. Then just in November, just a quick note, we had our November legislative days, which I think we had at least one presentation down there, just an update on programs. We are currently having additional legislative days as I speak. Looking for a clock that works. Maybe later this morning, Josh Bernard will be down there talking about landscape resiliency and what we're doing within the agency. So there's a presentation later on that. I'm not going to take too much from what Jennifer Michael or Thomas are going to talk about here, but I did want to make a note that the Habitat Conservation Plan and application for incidental take permits actually went through prior to the end of the year, which is what our goal was for the HCP for the private forest accord. It's moving forward, and we expect feedback from the services, continued discussions to get this in place by the end of by the end of 2027. So, but again, I'll let Jennifer talk about that a little more. Just want to make sure everyone heard about that. Additionally, the Board of Forestry meeting they had, I guess it was earlier this year, so in January, they had some 2025 Operator of the Year awards, which the Board of Forestry really enjoys. So if you, as you're going around talking to folks, if you have operators that you think should be nominated for this award, fill out an application and send it in. We're always looking for operators. So I just want to bring that to attention. It's an award that we really enjoy giving out. So if you know of anybody, let us know. Let's see. I want to switch a bit to, let's see, the budget itself. So I'm going to be careful how I say this. The budget was submitted. It is sitting, the governor's recommended budget is sitting down with the legislature. From what there was a reduction every agency had to take us a 5% reduction. So that's still sitting there. We won't know plus or minus additional or anything like that about our budget until after the session happens. So we presented our budget. It's the governor's recommended budget. Go look at it. we will have to wait until after that session to find out just how much of an impact or additional funding we get from the legislature after that. So just gotta leave it at that. And the details are in the governor's budgets. Unless Tim wants to add more, but I'm gonna leave it there, I think. Okay. All right. And then the other piece I wanted to really touch on, I don't know if you're hearing on this or not, but we did implement some key spending reductions. So that includes trainings, not having conferences in certain places, no hiring of unbudgeted positions, holding positions vacant for 90 days. So we're trying to take some cost measures in anticipation of what may happen in this legislative session. So if we're not quite getting back to you in a timely manner, they may not be somebody in that position for a reason. So just be patient with some of the folks out there in the field. And then they're also working through winter seasonal hiring. I'm not going to go into details with that. They had a little bit of a hiccup. Districts are working through that. So if you were looking forward to some of our folks coming and doing some work, it's just delayed a little bit until they get some things figured out. So welcome people. And then I don't think I covered it yet, but the state forester hiring process is in play. From what I can say is that the governor is meeting with the candidates. Who they are, I don't know. How many there are, I don't know. The intent is to have the selection done soon, and then a Senate confirmation happen it should happen within this short session. Was the plan from here on out. And that's about all I have on that piece. That's all I can say.
Okay.
How about that?
Just, I don't know if this is a good time, but just a suggestion, going back to Mike's comment about the habitat conservation plan. Yesterday, we, Wendy and I and others on the Adaptive Management Program Committee received a synopsis or a summary of the key points of the habitat conservation plan, and I haven't had a chance to go through it all, but I started reading it, and it's worth delving into for those that are interested to know more about what that is all about. And so, you know, if Mike or Heather or whoever wants to get a copy of that from Terry Free, or I can certainly forward it on, but I think it's worth distributing to the committee if they can check it out on their own if they're interested.
Yeah, so it's about 1,000 pages, Dave. So
No, well, the summary is only four.
oh, summary's
Yeah,
not, but yeah,
so-
yeah,
yeah,
yes,
right, right. Yeah, that would have been really fascinating. But I mean, the summary is only 40 pages, so it's a lot more manageable.
Right.
So is Assistant Chief Skinner still, or Acting Chief, is that still in place, or?
Interim state forester, yes.
But,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, you still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I have for updates. And then if there's any questions, what I talked about. One question I have, I see Julie was on here, and Katie, there was the question about the digital unified management plan. Will you give an update on that, Julie or Katie, or do you want me to?
I mean, I'm on the oversight committee, so we had a meeting, yes, Monday.
I didn't want to steal somebody's presentation or thought or update. Judy's there still.
Mike, you're talking about the digital unified management planning tool, the
Right.
Partnership for Forestry Education Project.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to give an update. Is that okay, Julie?
Or we could save it till roundtable, Julie. I don't know. I don't.
Go ahead and do it now, because it looks to me like we're gonna be ahead of schedule in our meeting, so we might as well front load it.
Okay, go ahead,
Thanks,
Katie
Katie.
or Julie.
So Julie, fill in wherever I'm missing details. So the project as a whole is broken into phase 1A, 1B, and phase 2. And where we stand now is EcoTrust has completed phases 1A and 1B, and those were funded by OFRI and ODF. And that's essentially EcoTrust did a bunch of survey work and outreach to landowners and forestry partners to try to get an idea of the the functionality of this tool that the landowners would like to see out of this tool. And I don't know if everyone in here is familiar with the tool, but the way it's been described is sort of the TurboTax of forest management planning. So it's supposed to build off of LandMapper, which I think everyone here is familiar with LandMapper. There was a presentation last year, I think, on it. And so landowners should be able to type in their address and a few basic information about their objectives for the land, and it will provide them like a basic output of a forest management plan or information to get them started on a forest management plan at least. So EcoTrust again did phase 1A and 1B, where they synthesized all the survey work and outreach work they did with landowners and forest partners. That's going to kind of be a roadmap for phase 2, which is the development of the tool. Phase 1 and 1A and B, again, were funded by OFRI and ODF through different grants, at least on ODF side. So phase 2 is really the big funding question mark. And currently we're working with the Forest Service to try to get a line item in a conservation reserve program grant. And the line item would be for roughly $325,000, and we would do an RFP process to identify the contractor to develop that tool. So we're in the process of submitting that application to the Forest Service for that grant, and they're expecting to know more about that in February, March timeframe. So we're hoping that we'll get that grant executed, and then we can move forward with the RFP process to actually do phase 2.
Thanks, Katie.
That's all I've got.
I had a couple of things because I'm on the oversight committee. We had a meeting Monday to go over some of the results of both, not just the survey, but they also did focus groups with forestry professionals as well as with landowners of varying levels of comfort with technology and experience with management planning tools. They've really done an extraordinary job kind of pulling a lot of those pieces together. I mean, the part that makes it so extraordinarily complex is it right now is Washington and Oregon. So it's both looking at state regulations and then federal regulations for programs like NRCS, which are far more complex than, say, tree farm certification. So figuring out all of those different pieces, they've done some really fine listening to people. And if it continues on, we're in the process. By the end of this week, we're supposed to do any more comments that we wanted to make on the sort of looking toward the functionality of the tool later on. But a lot of good heads. So hopefully money will really work for it, because it could be a really great tool. One of the best parts is that if people get started on it, I was thinking about it as a potential user. You could start with something fairly simple because you wanted to do tree farm certification, which is far more simple, less complex than, say, NRCS, but they would be able to hold all of that data so that then it could become something that you wouldn't have to start from scratch if you decided you wanted to apply for cost share or something. So there is some really wonderful possibilities with this tool, also possibilities to work with professionals, and also not lose your management plan, because be able both to update it, but also be able to find it again, because certainly tree farm certification wise, that is often when people go for recertification visits, finding the plan is often like, oh, I know I did that 10 years or 5 years ago. Where is it? That this could be very helpful for people. But there's a lot of complexity when you get down to users and varying levels of comfort with technology. So, but it's an awesome goal. Yeah.
I have a question, which is like, I was looking around for places that are centralized sources of information on these kinds of things. And one's like the Conservation Program Explorer or the Landscape Collaborative. Do these sound at all familiar to you? Because it seems to me like in the conversation we've had a lot about having a centralized place where people can access information about things like partnerships, all these things.
I mean, the Know Your Forest app or website,
Page.
Wouldn't that be a good place to send people, Julie?
Yeah,
Know
the
Your-
partnership
the
for forestry
partnership-
education in Oregon helped build the Know Your Forest site, and we've worked collaboratively with some of those other groups you mentioned, Wendy. A lot of times some of those are more based on the technical, like where to go for grants, and we try and link to those as well.
Yeah, I think the one I was looking at was a Conservation Program Explorer, which is more on the conservation side, which was looking for conservation-oriented grants. But it just reminded me that linking these things is so important, because you might be interested in having a conservation angle and need to be able to access, grant sources and grant writing tools and contacts with people there. Dave has his hand up.
Just a quick one, regarding the Digital Unified Management Plan at the Clackamas Tree School. Sarah Lorena from Eco Trust will be presenting an overview of the land mapper, but I asked her to provide an update of where they're at with that. So folks that are attending can get more of a hands-on view of what that is all about. And so hopefully that'll be informative. I have to step away for a little bit, but I'll be back.
And so I did want to touch on the tax credit. I did talk to Jesse's group about that, and they're putting together a communication plan around that. So that's why they want to move it to the March meeting. They want to kind of put that together and present that to you, and also talk about the tax credit possibilities around that. So yes, they're planning to be here in March. I was looking through my notes really quick. I don't know if anybody caught this, but we built a new office in Newport. We moved it out to Toledo, moved it to Newport. It's a really neat looking building. I think it may end up being the template we use for rebuilding some of our ODF buildings into the future. In fact, I know the Santiam office is still to be built. They're going to take a few pointers off of that office to build it up here at the Santiam office. But if you get the opportunity to go tour, then it's a neat looking modern building. So, but functional too. I got my meeting.
Okay, good. I think Jennifer Weichel, you're on right now, right? I think I saw a message from you. Are you available to go ahead with your presentation, since we're running a little ahead of time? I don't want to rush you.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. Sorry, I was multitasking.
Thank you. Introducing Jennifer Weichel. Thank you for presenting on the report.
Yes, so I'll key up my presentation here in just a second, but I'm Jennifer Weichel with the Department of Forestry, and I'm acting as the coordinator for the Habitat Conservation Plan. And then also prior to this work was serving as the wildlife biologist for the division. So let me, let's see if I can use technology today. Let me share. Okay, is it showing my presentation in slide view mode? Awesome, great. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I think it's been quite a while since I've presented to this committee. So I'm going to start with some background. And so for those of you who are, deep in PFA, maybe a little bit of repeat knowledge, but wanted to start from the beginning and roll through and just give an introduction to the HCP and kind of what it's all about and how it integrates with our normal business work. And then ending with kind of where we're at today and where we're going. So just as a reminder, this all came about with the Private Forest Accord, which was that monumental agreement between forestry and conservation groups to modify the Forest Practices Act. And the PFA ultimately resulted in legislative changes to the Forest Practices Act law, which then also led to an update of the rules. So our administrative rules for managing forestry in Oregon. So over 100 rules were either modified or are new. And then also directed ODF to conduct 2 additional rulemakings, which were the post-disturbance rulemaking, which is almost complete. And I think that goes into effect next year. And then the tethered logging rulemaking, which was initiated. So as of today, we have met all of our statutory obligations for the rulemaking. And then the other piece, of course, was that we were mandated to, under the Senate Bill 1501, the department was actually mandated to develop this habitat conservation plan with the end goal of obtaining incidental take permits under the Federal Endangered Species Act for private forest landowners in the state. So this is a key part of the private forest accord. At the beginning of the private forest accord, I think it was sort of nobody paid much attention to it, but it is really significant and important because if we're not successful, then there's some clauses in the Senate bill that would result in a rollback of the rules, as well as all of the good programs in place, such as the SFISH and the PFA grant program at ODF and W. So really quickly, what is a habitat conservation plan? For those that aren't deep in this, it can be a bit of a mystery of what this is. And essentially what it is the planning document, right? So earlier it was mentioned about the forest management plans for small landowners. Well, think of this as a forest management plan for the state, with the audience being the federal agencies. And it's a key part of a federal application for these ITPs. It's required by law to develop this HCP and have it approved in order to get the incidental take permits issued. There's requirements for what the content is that's in the document, and I'm going to spare you all the details of that. But in it, we do have to describe what are the activities that are going to be covered. So those are otherwise legal activities that may result in take of T&E species. But with that, we also have to describe what conservation measures are in place to minimize or offset those effects. And then, as I mentioned, the acceptance ultimately results in issuance of an ITP. So really quickly, for our HCP, actually, I'm going to pause because I have another slide here that I think explains this. So give me a second here. Okay, so going back to the ESA part of this. So what is an incidental take permit? If we could just break this down, the incidental part means it's not purposeful. So we're not out there purposely harming or killing endangered species. It's things that happen incidental to our normal business. Take means to kill, harm, or harass. And as I mentioned, relates to otherwise normal legal activities. And it allows for some level of take to legally occur. So if we're successful in getting these permits, essentially the state and the covered landowners under the permits would not be subject to ESA enforcement actions if take were to occur from normal forestry business activities. Okay, really quickly, what will the incidental take permit cover? I want to go over the species and the activities that are covered and kind of what's not covered. So for our covered species, these were actually set in the PFA agreement itself. And one thing I forgot to mention at the onset of this presentation is that Senate Bill 1501 was very specific about a couple things related to the HCP. One was that the HCP had to be developed basically within the framework of the PFA agreement. And what that means is that we're not allowed to add, a bunch of new stuff and new regulatory burdens on landowners. And also the species list was one of the pieces that was in the PFA agreement. So our species list for our habitat conservation plan is actually set in the PFA report. So what we're covering is this is a wholly aquatic HCP. So we're covering all native salmonids, salmon, steelhead, and bull trout. There are two other species of fish, mountain whitefish, three species, green sturgeon and eulachon. And then there are four species of stream-dwelling amphibians. There's two species of torrent salamanders, two species of giant salamanders, and then there's the tailed frog. So that is our list, and it actually ends up adding up to over, I think it's over 33 individual species and fish, ESU. So it's quite a long list. This is going to be a really big HCP. Well, it is a really big HCP. Okay, so this is what I was starting to talk about earlier, and hit pause. So the covered activities for under this document, and also would be under the incidental take permit, are essentially all normal timber harvest activities, or most of them, timber management activities. So that includes, and these are all described in detail in the document, describes timber harvest activities, early stand management. So that includes, reforestation, slash management, burning, those kinds of activities. And then road construction, reconstruction, maintenance, fish culvert replacement, all of those activities. And then in addition, there's coverage for restoration and mitigation projects, which are primarily going to happen under the SFISH program and the ODF&W Private Forest Accord Grant Program. And then also monitoring work will be covered. And that's mainly the work, the on the ground work that might happen under the AMC work. So effectiveness monitoring and compliance monitoring type stuff. And then also fish rescue and salvage, which is specifically related to stream crossing work. So that's our list of covered activities at a really high level. There are a few things not covered under this HCP that are important to point out. The biggest one is applications of herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers are specifically excluded. And again, that comes straight out of the PFA report. So that was something negotiated by the authors of the PFA. And then also the other big one is any activity, forestry management activity, that's not under FPA's jurisdiction would not be covered, because we have to have regulatory authority to implement this HCP. So if we don't have regulatory authority, there's no coverage because you're not going to be under the ITP for that activity. And then just one example would be land use changes to non-forest use. And obviously there's some nuance to that. If someone is conducting an operation, in compliance with the rules, and then subsequently comes in later for a land use change, the initial operation would be covered, but the land use change part is not, particularly if you're doing a PFAP that's going to modify the stream protection. And then also juniper eradication is another example. Okay, so our conservation strategy, this is where we get to describe all the good stuff that's happening on the ground. And these are essentially, even though this is really the biggest and most significant part of the HCP, what's described as really the Private Forest Accord changes under the Forest Practices Act. So we're describing the riparian management area strategy that's in place now, the new rules for timber harvest on steep slopes, all the regulations related to forest roads, the FRIA program, stuff like that. And then the two things that are a little bit outside of forest management is there is a conservation measure in the HCP specific to beaver management, and that is one that came about under Senate Bill 1501 that modified ODF&W's regulations for beavers, and it mostly applies to large landowners. And essentially what it did was change some regulations related to trapping and removal of beaver, and encourages non-lethal mechanisms for encouraging kind of coexistence with beavers. And then lastly, there's our last conservation measure in the document is restoration and conservation funding, and that's primarily the SFISH program and the PFA grant program. Okay, so how does this all work? So this HCP is like this big giant document that describes what we do for the audience of the services. But what it really is, if that in that top green cog there in my graphic is it is the foundation for an agreement, legal agreement between the state and the federal government for how we are going to implement um, and be compliant with the Endangered Species Act. And so that's what it really is the fundamental basis for this agreement. And what's described in the content of that document is mostly what's in the lighter green cog, which is Administration of the Forest Practices Act. That is how we implement the HCP on the ground, along with some other new requirements that we're going to have for reporting, tracking, and the monitoring piece of it. And then the ultimate outcome is the blue cog, which is that landowners are going to receive these regulatory assurances under the Endangered Species Act for these aquatic species. And so really the HCP ends up becoming an overlay to our business. It doesn't, it's not really a top-down situation, meaning that we're not going to be implementing new requirements on landowners, but it is going to kind of overarch, and information will flow up to inform the services how we are implementing the HCP appropriately over time. So as far as landowners, what do landowners have to do to be a part of this? It's not an opt-in or an opt-out situation. All private forest landowners will be under this incidental take permits, and then also counties and local municipalities that own forest land are also covered under this. So essentially, it's just business as normal for landowners. There's no extra requirements to be covered under the ITP, at least as we have it framed currently. And what that means is there's not like you don't have to apply to be in it. And also there's no additional regulatory burdens. And that's again where it comes down to what's in Senate Bill 1501 to develop this in alignment with the current agreement and regulations. So ODF's responsibility will be to administer the HCP and ensure that we're compliant with the terms of that agreement and contract with the services. The operator's responsibility is to comply with the FPA as normal. So that part of our business really hasn't changed at all. Okay, getting into the timeline really quick, where are we now? So ahead of this graph are a couple of bars not showing. We actually started this when the PFA agreement was signed and the first legislation came out in February 2022. We submitted a first draft of the HCP in December 22 because it was mandated in the Senate bill. That was really just a framework and skeleton of what was to come. We worked on it for over a year, 2 years, and then submitted our first full flushed out draft in July of 2024. Really quickly, also, we've been working with representatives of the PFA authors throughout this whole process. Our Senate Bill 1501 indicates that we have to closely consult with representatives of the PFA authors on development of the HCP. And we have been doing that and meeting with them very frequently and working on this in a collaborative manner. So anyways, stepping back again, so we submitted in July 24. That was very much a collaborative document. It took 6 months for the services to get back to us with some comments. Wasn't quite what we were expecting because they didn't deep dive in the document. They gave us high level overarching concerns and comments. And then we've been working again with the representatives of the PFA author coalitions and then also with the services to develop a second administrative draft. And that is what was just submitted last month, in addition to our applications for our incidental take permits. So what's coming forward next? So right now the red box is where we're at. The services are reviewing the document. We are hopeful that when we get feedback back from them, that we'll be poised to begin the NEPA process, which is National Environmental Policy Act. That is a key part of the HCP process. So the next phase would be both another revision of this document. Then we're hopeful that the next draft that will come out will be our public draft. So that will be a document available to the public. There also will be a public comment period with that. Simultaneously to that is the NEPA process where an environmental impact statement will be developed. And that will also come out for public comment. And usually those two public comment periods align. And then after that, we revise it one last time based on response to public comment and hopefully hit the finish line, which is the final HCP and the final environmental impact statement. And then ultimately the services will write a biological opinion, which is how our project will impact the species and their ability to survive on the landscape. That's where you hear the term sometimes of a jeopardy assessment. That's what's in that. And then ultimately issue the incidental take permit. And our drop dead deadline in the legislation is that we're supposed to have these incidental take permits by the end of 2027. So we've been on a very aggressive timeline. Okay, so why are we doing these multiple drafts? So as I mentioned, we submitted that document in July of 24, and I think we, the ODF and the author coalitions felt pretty good about it. But really what we wrote was something written in a way more for a forestry audience. It described our business pretty well, but not in a way that it was understandable to, a lay audience. And then also, there's some requirements for content to meet the requirements to obtain these incidental take permits. We thought we had done that, but we got some comments back from the services that they needed more details. And so really this draft that we've been working on fills those gaps that were missing in the last draft. And then also we've done quite a lot of work to reframe, particularly the chapter that describes the Forest Practices Act, trying to write that in a way that it's understandable for someone who's not a forester. Okay, so where we're at now, as I mentioned, we just submitted a few weeks ago. We're waiting for the services input. We don't know how long it's going to take them to get back to us. We're hopeful that it won't take 6 months again, but we really don't know, or it's a little bit out of our control. So in the meantime, we're just doing work to keep the project moving, and we're planning for the next steps, which will be hopefully the development of that public draft. So longer term, we're expecting a lot of meetings with the services, and then also be keeping coordinated with our PFA author coalition representatives. The interesting thing is that NEPA process where there's the development of the environmental impact statement. That's not under our control. That's done by the federal agencies, and they'll decide when that's initiated. But once that does get initiated, we're anticipating ODF will have some requests for information for them. So we'll have to support that effort. And then, as I mentioned, ultimately, there'll be another draft of this document that will go out for public review and comment period. And then ultimately the final development, the development of the final HCP. So with that, I'll stop screen sharing and take questions. I know this project is a little bit of a mystery sometimes, and folks often have a lot of questions, so happy to try to address. And then I put in the chat, just to clarify that document David Bugney was talking about is for AMC work and IRST for their committee's work coming up for development of an effectiveness monitoring strategy for this HCP. And so it's a kind of a subset of HCP content. So just to clarify that. Any questions?
This is Kate, is there a clause or a caveat in the Oregon legislation that if some things get delayed because the services are slow in responding to you, that December 2027 deadline, if it got pushed past due to no fault of like our own, as it were, ODF's own, is there a clause to still keep the PFA, the changes to the Forest Practices Act in place? Or is that like a drop dead kind of, we start from scratch again?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's definitely something that weighs heavily on all of our minds that are working on this. But there currently is not a clause to allow that. It's currently written as a drop dead. That said, I do believe that if I mean, okay, now I'm speculating a bit, but I think that if everybody is working towards the end goal and the services are engaging with us, I'm hopeful that somebody will go in and petition the legislation, that there'll be some kind of legislative change to extend the date. But that is, like, I have no insider knowledge. That's just speculation. But I would assume that that probably would happen. There's a lot of blood, sweat, tears, money invested in this project thus far. So starting over is not really a very good option for us.
If that were to happen, would that have to happen in this short session that's coming up?
Probably not. I mean, it could happen in this short session, but I think it would probably likely happen in the long session when that, end date is where there's maybe a little better information on kind of where things are landing. But again, I truly don't have any insider knowledge. That's just what would speculate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple comments, Jennifer, I guess.
Yeah,
So-
please.
So
Sure.
one of those, yeah, that's true. And I know there are a lot, when you say a lot of work has been done, it's an understatement of the year. I mean, this is a phenomenal amount of work that has been done to get this to this point in time. And with Jennifer's help, and I know Thomas and a few other people have helped with this as well.
Yeah.
Several people, not just ODF employees, but outside. There are a lot of people that are very interested in making this successful. So I'm speculating as well, but I don't think they'll let this just fall flat. So they'll move forward with it. I do want to make a comment about a couple things that Jennifer said just for smallholder owners. So if you start getting these questions from us, she noticed she talked about the ITP and what the importance is of having that in place. Maybe let Jennifer kind of comment on that for smallholder owners. And she kept saying legal activities so are covered under this. So why is it important for them to have this ITP? I don't know if I think you kind of went into it, but
You mean the legal activity part?
yeah, and why
Yeah.
should a smallholder owner pay attention to this ITP?
Well, that's a good question. So what it gives is the regulatory assurances under ESA, which means that, if something happens, if you're operating like normal and, something happens that's of no fault of your own and you're in compliance, that causes take. So that could be some like sediment delivery, something during a culvert replacement, the silly thing it sounds silly, but like doing work and you're out there and you're squashing salamanders or something. But it gives you those regulatory assurances under ESA. So not only will the services not come after you, but you're not subject to, or I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is there's more assurances that you have protection against citizen lawsuits as well. But as far as the legally otherwise legally, I forgot the term already, but so essentially the compliance with the Forest Practices Act is really what this is all going to hinge on. And so we're explaining to the services what happens on the ground, and both the compliance monitoring program that's going to look at compliance in a random way, but also our enforcement tracking is going to be really important to prove to the services that, people in Oregon do good work and implement, operations in compliance with the law. And that's going to help us as a state maintain this incidental take permit over time. Is that what you were getting at, Mike? I'm not really Okay,
No, you hit it. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
important that the ITP is what will help protect them, provided they're doing legal activities for forest activities.
And legal being according to the Forest Practices Act.
Correct, yes.
correct. Yeah,
So this is Teresa, one more point of clarification. So if I decide to have a let's shoot salamanders party, that wouldn't be covered.
Correct.
But
correct.
I'm cleaning up damage and somebody gets run over a salamander, then that's
Correct.
sad, but okay.
It's an important risk, at least from my perspective and kind of how I understand things and even dealing with ESA hurdles when it comes to S-fish here in our interim. It's a very critical risk management tool for small forest landowners. It's kind of how I often frame it to them.
Mhm.
And then also too, with the ITP and kind of this broader programmatic thing, hopefully that will be in place. It allows for timely delivery of these the ability to do these activities kind of on your schedule without, significant delays that typically occur with like projects that S-fish are doing right now, when you do have to get into a bunch of, go through a bunch of agencies to get the regulatory approvals and the permits and stuff. So
Okay.
so that is another
Yeah,
benefit that I see anyways, as I understand it.
yep. And that's partly why we've specifically added in, the fish salvage as a covered activity so that we can streamline that permitting system for culvert projects for landowners.
I was thinking about, this is Wendy, I was thinking about your
Yep.
slide starts out with the landowners and then it says business as usual. And then the bottom,
Yep.
it says operators are in charge, that slide. To me, it seems like the landowners to a certain extent are proceeding as usual in the sense that they are subject to the Forest Practices Act. They continue to comply. So
Exactly.
within the fact that there's some changes to that act.
Right.
But with the benefit, people are mentioning that there will be considerably less regulatory complexity in terms of incidental takes that might happen connected with our legal activities.
Right. So under the current scenario, the mechanism for a landowner to ensure that they're compliant with the ESA is to work directly with the federal government. And so that is, not only do they not have the staffing to handle that if every small landowner in Oregon decided to contact them, a lot of landowners don't want to deal with that, right? The federal government working with them and doing business with them to ensure that their projects are ESA compliant. And so what this HCP is doing is just getting rid of that whole step and integrating it in with the Forest Practices Act. And so for the landowners, what that slide is really trying to get at is that it's business as usual, meaning that, folks need to work with their stewardship foresters and, ensure that they're planning their operations and conducting them in compliance with the Forest Practices Act. And that's it. There's no new regulatory burdens put on from this HCP specifically because the PFA changes are already in place. And the landowners don't have to do anything specifically with the federal government to deal with ESA stuff. It'll be automatic. And so this inclusion of the ITP is meant to be an automatic process. And so it's an added benefit in that you get these regulatory assurances under the Endangered Species Act without additional work.
And I have one more comment, Jennifer, just for
Mhm.
clarification, is that this isn't the only HCP that's out there right now. So
Right,
via
yeah.
members- So there are 3 total, correct? Or is there 4? I know of 3.
Four total, 2 are already in place, and that would be the Port Blakely HCP, which only covers their lands. The Elliott Research Forest HCP, which only covers the Elliott Forest. The other 2 are this one, the Private Forest Accord, that will cover all private lands in Oregon for aquatic species. And then the other one that's been being worked on for quite a long time and is my understanding is very close to getting finalized is the state forest HCP, which will cover state owned and managed lands in Oregon. I think it's everything except for the Gilcrest and Sun Pass State Forest, if I'm correct. So each HCP is tailored to a different piece of the landscape, and each of them is very unique to the needs of that landowner, whoever's in the HCP, and the specific land base that is covering. I see David has a question.
Yeah, thanks. Just this is tangentially related, but it's been confusing me, and that is with regards to DEQ's requirements for stream temperature and mercury TMDL and what effects that might have on all this great work. That's really, in my view, ODF has been the forerunner in doing stuff that's necessary. But with this stream temperature TMDL stuff, is that going to pose any complexities or any required revisions, do you think? Or do we know yet? Or I'm just curious.
That's a hard one for me to answer because I've not been in the weeds on that. But my understanding is that would be a completely separate process. It's the clean. So that's all tied in, my understanding, because it's through DEQ, that's all tied in with the Clean Water Act and this HCP, and also, implementation and compliance with that. This HCP is not addressing Clean Water Act at all. It's separate. So the short answer is I don't really know, Dave. There's nothing direct that would result in us changing this HCP in relation to that, but there could be some weird kind of overlays that may, kind of political tensions that may cause us to think about it. And I see Adam just raised his hand, so hopefully he'll give us the right answer.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe just to help piggyback on that, I guess the practical application of all this to the small forest landowner is, the PFA is required potentially wider stream buffers, requirements for perennial non-fish streams and all those sorts of things. And so the stream temperature obviously is related to that. And so my question is, the DEQ, without doing that stream modeling business, I've got the title of it, but that ODF might have to go through, is that, they have the de facto 120-foot buffer, which is greater than anything we have. And so they've got to go through another layer of analysis to either prove or whatever that's not going to be a problem. So I'm just curious, with all this going on, you've got these multiple projects going on at the same time that may, the bottom line is affecting small forest landowner, and that's where my confusion stems from.
Yep. I'm gonna let Adam chime in here, but I do just want to make one point that when we worked on this HCP, this last draft, we really emphasized and changed text to make it clear that our strategy as a holistic strategy is really meant, it's assumed that we are maintaining stream temperatures. So we really make an argument that our strategy, all the pieces together, are achieving that. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, David, for that question. And since I'm here, I thought I'd chime in. So I think, with regards to TMDLs, Jennifer's right. This is a separate process. We meet with myself, Rebecca McCown, Kyle Abraham, and Josh Barnard. We meet with DEQ. Thomas does too. He's on the call, but we meet with them quarterly. And that's part of the discussion in terms of what the TMDL requirements are. We don't submit anything in terms of our plans that are extend above or beyond the current FPA rules, because we just don't have authority to do that, right, David? And your example of 120-foot buffer, we can't ask landowners to do that because that's not part of the FPA. And so, to be honest, those are the kinds of conversations that we have with DEQ. And I think that kind of stems from some scientific literature where it's we're in kind of a bit of a gray area. And so, we don't want to cause confusion like that. And we're trying to get on the same page with DEQ where, you know, the implementation plan doesn't, we're not asking anything from the landowner that's outside of the FPA. And so I think, you know, part of that is the BMP shield as well, as long as landowners are in compliance with the FPA that covers them in terms of the water quality requirements like TMDLs. So sorry for the confusion on that. I know I think yeah, you probably saw some things that were alarming. If I was a landowner, I would be too. Wait, what? We have these new rules, and now DEQ wants us to go above and beyond that. So I think what might be helpful, and Rebecca is much more knowledgeable on this topic. She's our subject matter expert on TMDLs and water quality standards. So if it's helpful, you know, down the road, we could have her come and chat more about that to help clarify any concerns around that, and maybe an update on in that sort of world of discussion and plans, etc.
Yeah, I talked with her on that. She was really good and helpful, but nonetheless, I get a little concerned when you get all these different layers of government telling everybody what they need to do. And so I just wanted to get the straight latest skinny. So you guys are doing a great job. So thank you for everything.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Well, this is only aquatic species. Like, we could end up going through all of this again, or there are more species on the planet than just aquatic species.
You're right that this HCP specifically only covers aquatics. And then for your upland teeny species, it would be business as usual, which, like I explained earlier, is the direct engagement with the services.
I want to let Margaret explain the comment she put in the chat. I think her hand is up. I can't, yeah.
Oh,
Margaret?
yeah, I was just curious about the NEPA review process. Is that going to be evaluating just the conservation strategies that you outline in the HCP, or is it looking at the full Forest Practices Act, you know, the amendments from the private forest accorder, which I know you're basically trying to kind of reword those into the conservation strategies, but I guess I'm just wondering what the scope of the NEPA is, because kind of to whoever made that point about the other species that are not included in this, I didn't know if having a solid NEPA review might also help eliminate some litigation risks for species not covered. So I'm just trying to get some clarity.
Yeah, I can't, the litigation part, I don't know if I can speak to, but so my understanding is, well, first of all, really quickly, stepping back to the HCP. So our conservation measures are all, which is part of what's chapter 4, our conservation strategy. Those focus on those 5 things I listed in that slide. So all the PFA changes. We do have in that chapter a separate section that describes also additional FPA regulations that support the conservation strategy. So that's where we bring in other regulations that support conservation of aquatic systems. So like our wetland rules, you know, they didn't change under the PFA. Our rules for lake buffers are in there. Clear cut size statutes, you know, those are all things that support hydrology, you know, watershed processes, that's the word I was looking for, and protection of streams. So those are described in there. So I'm assuming those will be part of the NEPA. But stepping back to the NEPA in general, so I get a little confused, I will admit, between the NEPA and the buyout. But my understanding, if I have it right, is that both of those evaluations will include an assessment of all listed T&E species. And so that would include the uplands. So there'll be some kind of an assessment of how, you know, our forest practices, our HCP is going to impact those species. And I'm assuming that they'll consider the FPA as a whole for that, mainly because as the document is written right now, we really are describing the FPA as a whole and how we administer it. And it would be wrong of them not to consider, for example, our spotted owl protections when they do their evaluation for spotted owls, because we do have rules for that species. But that assessment will be inclusive to all T&E species. And whether that's a litigation protection or not, I can't really speak to. I would assume it would probably depend on the outcome of that assessment that they do.
Thanks, that's
That-
helpful. Sounds like a really
Okay.
big lift for them and probably gonna take a long
Yes.
time.
Yeah, I know that they're concerned because, as you know, the federal government, there's been a lot of layoffs and staff reductions. So I think they are, we just put this 1,500-page document on their desk with their application, and at least for NIMS, my understanding is that there's, a timeline for them to review it. And U.S. Fish and National Marine Fisheries Service, which, by the way, I forgot to mention that at the onset. There's actually multiple permit applications because there's two separate federal agencies. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service covers all of the resident trout, bull trout, and then the salamanders or amphibians, and then National Marine Fisheries Service covers all the anadromous fish, which are all the rest of the salmonids, as well as the Eulicon, whitefish, and sturgeon. Actually, whitefish is under U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I believe. But so two separate agencies, two separate processes. The NEPA will only be done once. One of those two agencies will take the lead on it, but they're working together on this.
I have a question. This is Wendy about the overlap of the different legal authorities involved here. Because if you look at the first agreement, like that piece of paper that was signed with all the signatures, and following that, the report that was developed over a couple years, and then the two Senate bills, something 501 and 02, and then the rules that were developed under that, and now the HCP. It's a lot of authorities that overlaid on one another, and I think that the statute says that they basically incorporate the private forest accord report. So does that mean that essentially the HCP, sort of the framework of the legal authorities for the HCP include that report?
You're right that the Senate bill did refer to that report. So it's considered sort of embedded in with that legislation. I will say though that as far as what regulates our business, it's the actual statute itself, and then our implementing rules at the Board of Forestry. Put the changes. That's what drives our business and our regulations. The PFA report is instrumental in informing the HCP document. But even with that, there's language that was written in the very beginning that's in the PFA report, that doesn't necessarily align, with what's in rule or what's in the HCP, but it's just semantics. It really is fundamentally the basis for everything. So I'm not really sure what your question is, but like I said, the HCP, we were very deliberate in the way that we wrote this so that it's not adding additional burdens. So there's not, the burden, any changes are more burdens on the agency than landowners, meaning that we are going to have new reporting requirements, kind of going from us to the services, and new requirements for tracking our business. And that's all going to be good for us as a agency, that we're doing a better job tracking what we're doing and being able to explain what's happening on the landscape. But that's the biggest change. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the HCP is another layer, but at least our understanding of it currently is that it's not, as far as landowners, because it's a programmatic HCP, where the agreement is between the ODF and or the state and the federal government, and then we work with landowners for the ITP kind of compliance and tracking. That's just done through FPA administration. So it's, even though it kind of is another layer, it's more of another layer for our agency than it is for landowners. At least that's how I view it.
Yeah, that was helpful because you're discussing the issues I'm interested in, which is I tend to think of the primary rules as being the statute, being the highest level
Correct.
of law, which
Correct.
incorporates the private forest accord report. So the rules basically have to be consistent with those. And then as you're
Correct.
discussing, I'm thinking of the HCP as a little bit sitting on the side there, implementing those, but partly a relationship with the federal agencies document.
Yep.
On the
No,
side.
You're right. They all have to. So the PFA report was the first document that was the foundation for everything. The statute is what really directs our work and directs the Board of Forestry, to develop the rules. And one of the things I didn't really mention, well, I did mention it, but not specifically, but in that statute, there's all of these, there's multiple clauses in there, but basically that says that if the HCP, so if we're successful in getting incidental take permits, but the outcome of that is that there's going to be either additional economic burden or significant changes in environmental benefits compared to what was in the actual PFA report, that any member of the author member groups that sign the MOU can come to the board and petition to basically back out of the HCP. And so it's kind of like the 2027 drop dead clause. It's one of those clauses in the Senate bill that's really been setting sidebars on our work. And so we have been very careful to write this HCP so that it is in alignment and within the bounds of the PFA report, so that we don't get into that situation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions or comments from anyone else? Let's see. Yeah, well done. And that's very helpful time to have this overview. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yep. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And thank you. Thank you for everyone who's working on this department wide.
There's multiple people in that room who have been critical in helping me. I'm just the orchestrator of this. It's really been a team effort, a lot of people pitching in. So thanks everybody. And also Mike Cafferetta, who's, I saw him for a second on the thing. He's one of our recent additions to the our author coalition group representing Oshawa. So he's been helpful and a great addition to our project.
Yeah, Mike, I saw your hand up earlier and I'm glad it's back again.
Yeah, so thanks. I was going to say, Jennifer, and for the group, one of the things about that document, it may be 1,000 pages, but there's a portion in there that describes the Forest Practices Act in sort of an, I think Jennifer said layman's terms or something, but it's actually really useful. Like if you don't want to read the statute, which is hard to read, and you have to go between statute and rule, and the OFRI cartoon book, which is really useful for an individual item. But if you're just trying to understand kind of what's going on, I think it's a unique writing of the Forest Practices Act that was really helpful. So I just wanted to let people know they can see it there and appreciate that work. My hand up was up earlier, and Kate sort of asked a question about the other species that are not covered. And I don't know if it's worth it or not, but that was a good question. And Jennifer, some of the trade-offs there, are you able to sort of mention why they didn't cover those or what the trade-offs were in that conversation? Maybe not, but it is an interesting choice.
I can't, only because I wasn't in the room when they were negotiating, but my understanding is that didn't really come up. It was one of the things that they agreed to early on, that this was going to be just an aquatic HCP, and that the conservation and forestry side kind of set aside. It was just non-negotiable for the upland species, because it likely would have sent the conversation in a different direction. So they focused on the aquatic. That's my understanding.
That's correct, Jennifer. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that the Washington the Washington comparable plan, the forest to fish or whatever it's called, which has been in place, I think, maybe almost 25 years. It's kind of similar to this one, and it also is an aquatics only.
Correct.
HCP.
Yeah. My understanding also is that the author groups, well, I don't, I think it's right in the PFA report. They basically use the Washington HCP as the framework for this one, or the framework for the agreement. Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks again. I'm looking at the right clock, not the one on the wall. Okay, next we have a discussion of stream mapping by Thomas.
It looks like Mike's gonna fix it. Yeah.
That's a bad clock.
Let me pull my presentation up, then we'll get started. All right, looks like it's pulling up there. Again, Thomas Whittington, I am the water quality specialist for the Forest Resources Division. I work under Adam Coble, who's also on the meeting and spoke earlier, in the water quality and monitoring unit. So that's a recent switch. If you were tracking before, I was working with the Pittsburgh unit. So appreciate all the information Jennifer went through about the HCP. There's a lot of stuff that's pretty related here as far as stream mapping. And it's not just mapping, it's protections too. So I'm going to dive in that. So I want to make sure I had everybody on the same page. So I'll back up a little bit kind of to the start of the PFA and what came out of the Senate bill. And really what affects the streams and riparian protections were really the linchpin of all the stuff at the Private Forest Accord. But hopefully answers the questions. I talked to Dave Bugney last week, just to make sure I try to cover everything. If I don't cover something, please ask questions at the end. I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. So, like I said, I want to back up real quick to why, where we're at with streams, the stream protection, stream mapping, everything related to really riparian areas on forest land. So what I show here is just some of the high-level objectives that came out of the Private Forest Accord around for streams and riparian areas. Just some of this drove a lot of the work I've been doing for the last 2+ years, ever since the Accord really came out. So what of that first one there is a big one, and we'll talk about that in detail here with the rest of the slides. So we developed a new stream network for fish use and stream flow. So that's really talking about the classification of streams. We broke up what we had before in regions to 2 regions, East and West Oregon. Really trying to get the equitable, consistent riparian management protections across the state. And keen interest of probably everyone here is provide options for small forest landowners. So that really was the drivers for some of this stuff that I'm going to talk about here. So out of the Accord, right, had the Accord come out. That's a big report everybody's probably seen, is familiar with. Jennifer had it on a slide earlier. Out of that, right, we had to take kind of what was in that report, which just really provided the foundation for what the rules were. So we had to, or the board had to adopt very, I think it's the biggest change the FPA ever as far as the amount of rules we had. A lot of those were focused around riparian areas and streams and everything around the management protections there. Well, this slide just highlights a few of those, real high level. All right, so some of the new stuff that came out of the Accord, right? Vegetation retention on type N perennial streams. That's something we did not have before prior to the PFA. Equipment limitation zones, or ELZs, I'll refer to them later, right? That's something new as well. And then the thing here, small forest land minimum options provides a different riparian management prescription. Sorry, riparian management area prescription. for those who qualify under the small forest land option. And the other piece there is, as far as, type in streams, we also broke those into perennial and seasonal. So the big piece that's really a priority for my work right now is figuring out how we go about, or how landowners go about figuring out what's perennial and what's seasonal. The only other thing I'll mention there, it's not on the slide, is the overarching thing, right? The desired future condition for streams in Oregon. That the language was revised somewhat and has some of that to reflect some of the stuff that's in the Brett Forest Accord as well. Not really jumping into the streams piece. So to apply the protections that are required in the FPA, we really know we have to figure out how to classify the streams. So there's high level pieces around, right, what different streams have different protections based on the beneficial use. Usually the highest is the fish streams, or the SSBT streams. Those are the salmon, steelhead, bull trout streams. So we have to know where those are in the landscape. We have domestic streams, which are usually identified by registered surface water, what's the word I'm looking for? Permits or intakes there. That's or community water systems. So we try to identify those streams that are used for domestic purposes. And now we have protections around type-in streams, or at least we have additional protections around type-in streams too. So we have to know where those are on the streams. We have to classify every segment for those different things. This really leads into the why we have to do that, because each stream receives different level of protection. So the other piece about figuring out what streams receive what protection is stream size. So we have 3 stream sizes. So smaller streams usually have a little less protection than the larger, medium, large streams usually have higher protection. When I say protection, that usually equates to either wider riparian management areas, or well, that's usually what it is now. And the new rules, that's really what we have, is larger streams, wider riparian management areas. The big piece that's something that's new when it came out of the Accord was adopting a fish distribution model. That basically provides the initial classification for fish use streams across the state. Prior to that, a lot of streams were unknown, so we had to go through a process to identify if they were fish use or not. So the model provides that first initial classification, and it can also be surveyed if there was a question about it, if it was truly fish or not. That's an option for landmarks as well. And with the new perennial piece, we had to also figure out processes on doing that. So right now, we're working on, or when we first had that report come out, the rule changes, landowners have to go out and really identify that based on a survey protocol that's developed with ODFW, really as a lead there, but with our assistance to provide a process for anyone to go out and, within the rules, the new definitions, go out there, determine where that break is between perennial and seasonal on a small type-in streams. That's a multi-phase approach, as I mentioned. Right now, that's the current what we can do to identify those streams, and then we're moving towards another model here to help do that, to eliminate some of that field work in the future as an option for landowners.
Can I pause for a second?
Sure.
I'm getting a little mixed up at who's doing what there. I think you just said who's doing what.
Sure.
Can you make it a little clear, what the department does and what the landowner does in terms of determining perenniality?
Oh, so perenniality right now, I'll dive into this.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah, I'll try to jump into the perennial piece,
Okay.
because that's a big, big focus. A lot of questions come.
Okay.
I'll go in that in more detail for sure. So these stream classifications are key, right, to figuring out how we apply the FPA rules around riparian management areas.
I think this is perfect timing. A rhetorical question is, how do we determine classifications and then communicate those to operators and owners? That really goes through the mapping piece, right? So that's, we have to do that. We do that through stream mapping and development of the new hydrography layer that we did back in 2023. So the state undertook a process. We started back in right after the accord came out. We undertook a process with a contractor to complete and develop a new stream network to map the majority of all streams in the state for forest practices purposes. We did that. We had high resolution elevation data, so what we call LiDAR. I forget what the acronym is, but it's basic laser distance measurements. And that's at a 1 meter resolution. Where we had that, we mapped the contractor had a process to map, use that elevation data to map all the streams state. Where we didn't have that LiDAR coverage, because it's not 100% coverage across the state. It's a pretty expensive tool, but it has been over the past 20 years. They've really done a lot of work to provide a lot of coverage, a lot more coverage than there was 10 years ago. So areas where we didn't have that, we have lower resolution down to 10 meters, and that basically all that information goes into creating an elevation model to map streams. And through that, the contractor used that to create a synthetic stream network, which is what the streams we have now. After they did all that work to map the stream using the LiDAR and the elevation models, like I mentioned earlier, we adopted a fish distribution model that was then mapped onto the new hydrography, which is the stream mapping, to determine the initial fish use classification. Go into a little more detail here, but we also used the survey information, fish use survey information we had to override those models. So that was something that was key to make sure we retained that information that was done by landowners for the last 20, 25 years. We didn't rely on the model entirely. We used the survey information where we had it. The other piece that was required for the contractor did was showing perennial information using national hydrography data. That's the NHD acronym, to use that information to show the perennial seasonal attribute on those streams. But in rural, that information was just for information. Basically, we provide landowners and operators a start to do some of the survey work. And that's all is in rule right now, is that you can't use that for any kind of regulatory purposes. But it was included to provide some information around what may be perennial or what may be seasonal. So that process to get the new hydrography, this slide just kind of shows like what we had before. Previous was what we call cartographic, or just using maps or quads to take basically using those topographic maps. They map streams where they kind of made sense, right? So that's what happened. That's what we had before, was a stream network based on that process. Pretty manual, like drawing the stream in there or using the previous information across what the USGS provides on those quad maps that have been around for decades. So that's what we had before. With the new one, like I said, we used the elevation data with the LiDAR, the lasers, high precision. Contractor took all that information to develop this, what they call a synthetic network. It really uses a lot of different algorithms to determine where those streams are on the landscape. And I'll show you a picture here in a minute, but from what we had before with that kind of that drawing the maps or the streams on the map to what we have now, it's night and day as far as where streams are. Not perfect, of course, but it's better, at least in my opinion, much better. And this is a picture here to kind of give you an example of what our stream network looks now. Our stream hydrography data looks like with the classifications applied based on either the model or the surveys, right? So that the blue ones here are fish And then they also have our size categories, right? So fish small, fish medium, little different weights on the line to show that, and the yellows and the browns to show the non-fish there as well. And the background there's just, I think that's the base map showing kind of, like, you see the streams follow the topography there and are drawn. With pretty good accuracy if you compare it to, you know, any kind of visual information you may have through these maps or elevation maps out there. So that really is what we have. A quick example of what we have now, what we use for our regulatory network. Like if you're submitting notification in Ferns uses this stream data to determine what your protections may be. It's not going to be 100% correct, but it's going to give you that, hey, I have a fish stream out there, or I have an SSPT stream. I have a small, I'm going to have to do some more investigation on that small stream. Is it, where's the perennial at? Do I have to do a survey, or what are my options there? Which we'll dive into. Like I mentioned earlier, what we have now does have that National Hydrography data set attribute for perennial and seasonal, but again, that's only for information purposes. We are working towards a regulatory approach for a model that would allow us to, or allow the landowner to choose to use that or do a survey. So stepping back a little bit around the perennial stream piece and type ins. To be clear, the perennial, where we determined the break for seasonal and perennial, applies only to small streams. That's small stream is defined a rule. What that is basically a thing that flows under 2 cubic feet a second on an annual average basis. The contractor did that work to break up those sizing based on our rule as a process. They did all that work to break all the streams up to the appropriate sizes. So the phase one was basically kicked off when the rules took effect in January of 2024 for determining perennial stream flow. That required kind of two options there right now. So to determine that, one option is to do a field survey. Landowner needs to determine that break if we follow the protocol that was developed, and the guidance that's out there, technical guidance to go do a survey on these small in streams, follow that protocol, and that will determine your break for perennial and seasonal. That information, if you do go collect it, comes to ODF, the forester, usually your stewardship forester. That information then gets approved by ODFW. Then through the process, we update the map to show that survey information in the enterprise statewide data. So that's phase one right now. We're moving towards the second phase, which is outlined in rule, which the board just made an update because we had a date and rule. The original board originally adopted the rules for last year. We recognized that date was obsolete, so we asked the board to update that to producing or going into phase two here for July 1 of this year, 2026, to do this work. And so that work entails, this phase two entails publishing this modeled and a perennial flow. I'll go in a little more detail about the model, what we're trying to do with the model. So this phase two includes basically, so phase one, you can do a survey. If you don't do a survey, you can also treat the entire small in segment as perennial, which it comes with some additional requirements and protections. So now we're going to move into phase two here. This year's the plan. We'll publish this modeled in. Landowner can choose to use that modeled in perennial flow as the break, just the same break as before. Or if the landowner disagrees with that, they can still do a field survey. But there are some additional constraints in this phase two around not doing it in drought years or overly wet years. So there's constraints there. There also be a little more notification letting ODFW or ODF know, and then including ODFW. As well. So a little more about the, I might have talked about this a little bit, but currently, like I mentioned, phase one here on the left, multiple approaches available. That option is out there, following the protocols, complete that operational field survey, using the approved protocol, get that and submitting that information to ODF. We'll make sure it gets approved by ODFW. And in lieu of completing a survey, so maybe you can't get the stream, maybe you don't want to worry about it. So if you don't do a survey in this current phase that we're in, you would treat the entire small end segment as perennial while playing the RH max. We'll get into a little more technical details here, which is this distance that's defined in rule based on what that small stream flows into. So if it flows into a fish, there's a shorter distance that applies. If it flows into an SSBT, there's a longer distance for what the tree retention is there on the small end stream. So that's defined distance. And also, if you're going to treat it as perennial, like I mentioned earlier, we adopted equipment limitation zones. And there's two different types of those. The RELZ, I believe it's restricted equipment limitation. It has a little higher threshold. You have to retain some of the brush into small diameter trees under 6 inches there. So that's what you could do if you were not going to do a survey in a small end stream. And so I just want to make clear that all determining or applying the protections around the small type end streams applies to all landowners. So the right-hand side here, modeled in approach to phase 2 that was in the previous slide. The landowner may select the modeled in, right? So we'll have that end of perennial flow that's based on the model published on the, at least the plan is to publish it on the regulatory stream data, right? So that'll be available to anybody using or looking at the hydrography that we have. Or they can do that, what's going to be called in this next phase, verified end of perennial flow. So that's the two options when we get in this next phase.
Can I ask something quickly about your slide? So on the left, you say determining status, blah, blah, applies to all landowners, including SFOs. Is that also true for the modeled end?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it applies to the process as far as determining perennialities on the small ends applies to all landowners. It's really, but yeah, there's no difference there. As far as the prescriptions may be different, right? What you can do around the option, but determining the perennial seasonal status applies.
That was a quick question on the going into phase 2. And as you mentioned earlier, in terms of kind of that timing that you can do the surveys, there may maybe some more constraints there, but will essentially the survey protocol, pretty much that field-based protocol, be the same or
It'll
similar?
be the same. There'll be some minor updates, and once we get closer to that, we'll have ODFW is a lead on the survey protocol itself, but we'll make sure that we're trying as far as the updates, make sure it's published. So out of the determining the break as far as the perennial seasonal, right, that drives the RMA requirements around. So once you select, or once you determine the break, right, then you apply the requirements, which probably a whole nother presentation, but I'll cover it. I have the slide that I stole from, or at least the illustration I borrowed from OFRI on the company slide as well. Which is the next slide. There we go. So it's good. I helped OFRI with reviewing this, make sure we had a slide. You probably can't see it real well here. Please go to the OFRI Illustrated Manual if you want to pull this out. But start on the top, I think is the easiest. You have that, at least on the west side, a 35-foot ELZ. So that's kind of the highest, stream highest up in the watershed is going to have that. That's going to be applied to all the small streams at a minimum. And as you move down the watershed, you may have that 35-foot, it's not restricted, it's retention equipment limitation zone. I was mistaken there. And that applies to those type, to all the perennial streams that we've determined following the processes I mentioned earlier. And then as we go down the stream, you get more tree retention rights of 50 foot on type NP streams that are flowing into the SSBT stream. At least that's on the upper end. And then as you move down, you have medium and large streams, type N streams, they'll have a 75 foot. As you see it progress, larger streams, as you go down here, have larger tree retention areas. The largest being the 110 foot no cut areas around the type F and type SSBT streams. Small or the medium and large there streams. So where we're at, just give this is the flow modeling update that's most recent that I put together where we're at. I'll try to cover this. Just keep this in mind. This is changing as we work through it. But so our objective is to get a flow model published. That's the goal. And so going back a little bit to get there, we have looking at a couple different approaches with the model. So Trainworks is the same company that was the contractor that developed the hydrography back in 2023. We've been working with them since then to do some other work around the ACP, doing a lot of analysis. We asked them to help develop everything if they could, and they agreed they said they could. So we have them on contract to develop flow modeling on 6 pilot watersheds across the state. Those are kind of spread. We got a couple on the east side and 4 on the west side. And they're in process doing that to work on using the observations that have been collected for the last 3 years now around flow status on these streams, right? We have landowners collecting the survey information. AFW and ourselves taking that information, now have over 18,000 points on telling us what the flow status is on these points. So the contractor is going to use that information, or is using that information to develop a model to help predict the end of rain. So they're working through that. That started back in October. They contract the pilot results for the 6 watersheds are due mid-February from Trainworks. Then our plan is really March is going to be a key month as far as I'll mention the other piece here in a minute, but it's going to be a key date for looking at all these models, evaluating what the results are, and then trying to figure out the process and best way to publish that information. And their date that the board just made the change on is July 1st, 2026 to publish flow model results. Parallel path here also, USGS, right? The federal government agencies kind of the lead on all things mapping and streams in the country. This was even prior to the PFA. They been working on the same thing, trying to figure out where streams are perennial, where streams are seasonal. They basically have been working on. They have two teams working on 2 different models, 2 different approaches to models for flow modeling. So they're working on one that's using random forest, which is a statistical method to determine some outputs. They're also working on, and I don't have a ton of details, just statistical approaches, Bayesian as well. So it's kind of 2 different ways to take statistical models and produce predictions. They're working on those, and they hope to have some of those results to us about the same time or shortly after the pilot results are going to come in from Trainworks. So we have meetings with them, and they provided us an update last week or a few weeks ago. So they had a little bit of delay due to that government shutdown, but they're working on those as well. And those will be really informative as well as far as looking at results for them. So we'll have basically, I think, at least we'll have something to look at where we'll have 3 different potential approaches for flow modeling. Looking at those, determining what's best for as far as the forest practices, and then moving forward towards that publishing piece here next few months. Covered everything. Oh, yeah, well, so we'll take those models, right? So then we have to verify what those models are predicting. So whatever data, we have some data that was collected late last year. We have some other data. USGS is going to do the same thing to take whatever data that wasn't included in the modeling to help us verify the predictions that are coming out. So we use that data to see, was that prediction match up to the observations that were collected here over the last year or so. So that'll help us verify that model's prediction accuracy. Just try to see where it's at, is what's the tolerance there. We're going to be looking for evaluating the model. So that's the drill down and dirty on the modeling update. So I mentioned two different agencies primarily on this, us, ODF, as the forest practice lead. Right, we have various roles and responsibilities. We also have ODFW, I mentioned, as well as very intertwined with this work as well. They're really key to help us evaluate the model. They have their hydrology team working with USGS closely, but we're working with TerrainWorks closely. They really help us, they're key on reviewing those stream surveys that come in and proving it. That's outlined in rule. So fortunately, through the PFA, they were able to add more staff to help do that. So they were able to add 6, they call prime forest accord biologists across the state with the funding that came through the Senate bill. That's huge, right? So we have a lot more workload. We have regional biologists now that are responsible for reviewing the surveys that come in and help proving this as well. We're also a great asset for questions that come up. They can, usually pretty available to come out with the stewardship forester. There's a question, and landowners. That applies to anybody who has questions, right? It could be a large landowner or small landowners. I was just out last week. Question came up around some street work. PFA biologists had the question. Landowners coming out. I got asked by the stewardship forester. So we're all looking at the same thing, helping answer those questions as best we can. They're also kind of the lead, and Josh may talk about this as well. They, define or help us communicate what the in-water work periods are for those individual streams. They also can help us consult on those requirements, maybe if we need variances to get out, different timelines around those in-water work periods as well. What I'm trying to say here, both agencies are key to assisting landowners and available to help. When available, I think that's key. We're always trying to help. They're always trying to help. Stewardship forestry usually is the first call, and they're going to bring in the ODF biologists when needed. Pretty responsive from my scenes. Should really help. ODF, the forestry direct, can help with that as well, helping do it. Try not to commit too much here, but they can help identify those perennial streams, or ask ODFW for help. They're going through the notifications, making sure that whatever operation comes in, that we're communicating what those requirements are, and then really focusing on those. Making sure the landowner knows, or the operator knows, I got this stream on my property, these are the requirements. That's really key, so they know, so there's no questions, down the road in the operation. Oh, I didn't know that. So that's key, right? Trying to make sure that what the streams are out there, they can know that and then apply the appropriate protections from. One note I didn't want to mention earlier was kind of when I had the slide up about the mapping, right? This is something it comes up a lot around. Well, the map shows me a stream. Well, the map is a representation, right? It's information, the best information we have around where the stream should be or might be, right? So kind of like goes two directions. There may be a stream out there that wasn't mapped. You still have to protect that with the appropriate. You still have to figure out what the classification of that stream is. Is it small? Usually a small, right? If it's not mapped, it's going to be a small stream. Is it perennial? Is it seasonal? Then apply the appropriate protections. Vice versa, right? I may have streams that are mapped that aren't there. Map doesn't dictate protections. It's only a representation. The stream is not there. We apply all the other appropriate forest practice rule requirements, right? We would not apply a stream. We have a definition for a stream. So we're not applying any other requirement. If it's not, no stream there, we just apply any other, harvesting or whatever it may be, for the forest practice rules. So map doesn't dictate the protections. Communication. Everybody know.
I can ask, if, from what
Yeah.
you said before, it sounds to me like in that second situation, if it shows a stream that in fact isn't there, that then the landowner's choice then is to, or alternative is to do a survey showing that it's not there. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a couple of options there. You don't have to do a survey. Like I said, the on the ground is what we hold everybody to as part of the requirements of the FPA. Great information if they have a chance to do, you don't have to do like an official survey, but they could map it out and say, hey, the stream's not here. There's no bed and bank, which is kind of the rule, the criteria rule. There's no stream channel. It ends here, and then just map showing it go up here, it's not there. If it's simple as that, we wouldn't have, there's not an official process, but that information, get it to the forester and get it to our GIS mapping people to get it updated.
So you can demonstrate there's no stream with something short of an official survey.
Yeah, and then
In that-
communicate that to us, and then, unless there's some other question that comes up, we would.
Yeah.
Have to do update. If it's associated with the survey, go ahead and do the official survey, like we're doing. A lot of times it comes up just in the process of doing a perennial survey in a small stream. Like you're gonna go up, right, the streams usually, you start at a point going up. And I figure out the end of perennial, I go up the required distance, where I notice that the map, if I, have in hand there, the map showing it go up a lot further. Just note that on the survey, that also gets updated in our process. We'll update the map to reflect it. There's no stream channel above this point.
And is that useful even if you're not, because it's an operations notification that triggers most of this. Is it still useful information just to have that updated so that, say, like in our case, 20 years from now, when we might want to do a thinning, the not stream that has been mapped.
Absolutely, yeah. It'll be monumented that way or documented, and if you do an operation future, you don't have to worry about it showing up on the map or inference.
Because we met with our stewardship forester and said, so look at this, it's really not a stream. And you're right, it's not, it's an overflow from a neighbor's pond. And sometimes runs and sometimes doesn't. But is there more process you need to, is there an official process to do that more than talking to our steward? Than talking to your
I think,
stewardship
like you
forester?
mentioned, yeah, you're working with the stewardship force. Like there's other things out there. There's canals, there's stuff that's not a stream but has water in it. They'll either work through it with the landowner or they'll call me or Josh or somebody to help them. There's that situation comes all the time, and there's a lot of water conveyance out there that's not a stream. So like overland flow, if there's no bed and bank or channel, it's not a stream. We don't have protections for specifically for water that just flows in the ground. So which happens sometimes. Roads, ditches, right? Ditches on a stream. So
I feel like there's streams.
yeah. Yeah, we have a very specific definition for what a stream is. So I get that question quite a few, like, well, is that a stream? What?
Some ditches are streams, but not all ditches are. Correct. Yeah, not ditches.
The ditch might have a fish in it.
Yeah, there's that.
I have one slide, Dave. You have a question I could answer now, or just this is the last one?
Oh, well, when you're ready for Q&A, whenever is appropriate.
I'll just, this last one, just really just what's available out there, right, for other help. Of course, our website has a lot of information. I mentioned you want to really dive into details around small type in streams and what the requirements are and the survey protocol. There's technical guidance available on our ODF webpage, which is under the Forest Resources. Then you go to Forest Practices Act. There's a list of technical guidance that's been published. We're working on more, getting more published soon, including some stuff around. Josh, if I can touch on what we're working through that all the time. Go through a process for each of those technical guidances to get reviewed, then we publish those. Other big thing that is coming out in the next, I've seen, we've had a few more videos around forest practices on YouTube, on our ODF YouTube channel. So those are gonna, I think there's gonna be more coming out here soon. I think the one that just came out a few weeks ago is around written plans and road construction. Those are aimed to help, anybody curious about what the requirements are. I think it's like 9 minutes long, goes through all the pieces there. I mentioned earlier, the latest edition of the illustrated manual. Again, we're always consulting with Ofri on that, making sure the information there is good and helpful, correct, which is a big thing, of course, as well. And then, of course, our foresters and foresters and the ODFW, PFA biologists, you need to, any questions about who's where? I know our forester, we have our map online under the webpage. Not sure if the PFA biologists are up there, but I can. Foresters know there's 6 of them, so 4 on the west side, 2 on the east side of the state. Pretty quickly tell you if you have questions like who your PFA biologist may be. Answer that as well. I think that is all I have. So yeah, questions now? Or anything I didn't cover or cause confusion? Hopefully I didn't cause too much confusion.
That was a really helpful summary and like for me, big uptick in understanding. So I really appreciate it. And I see Dave has a question.
Yeah, first off, thanks, Thomas. I think you hit all the hot buttons, so kudos there. Just 2 quick questions. One is it possible sometime to get a copy of this PowerPoint? I'd like to extract some information from it. To my follow-up question is that, being our newsletter editor for Clackamas County Farm Forestry Association, that's kind of that, and other mailings are a conduit for those folks. Small woodland owners are kind of an interesting bunch. We have quite a few that aren't even connected, on the internet. And so we need to get information like this out to them. So I would assume that really their main stop to get the latest and greatest is for them to contact their stewardship forester. That's correct, right?
For the latest information?
Yeah, since we've got, like I say, we've got folks that just aren't computer connected, and so they need to get this information in some other way. And I get it to them through mailings, those that are members of CCFFA. But for those that either are or are not members, they should really contact their stewardship forester to help them along the way with this. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, I think especially if we're going to do or thinking about doing some type of forest activity, right? That's going to trigger notification and what are my requirements? That's going to be that'll be the first priority for a stewardship forester. They're very busy, right? So I'm just trying to lay out that if it's general questions, it may take a little while to get back. If it's going to be something more related to notification on the forest practices, that may get higher priority than other stuff.
Just one thing I just thought, thanks. One thing I just thought of as you were talking is that, will there be some sort of a protocol to periodically update the maps as more is learned? For example, as fish passage barriers are removed, or as people say, oh, there are fish there, or there are not fish there. Are there protocols set up to do that, or how does that work?
So yeah, the map, as far as I should say, the hydrography data that we have is constantly being updated. So it's not static in any sense of the word. I think Melanie was on here earlier. She's our lead stream GIS specialist. So like I said, that survey information is coming in, getting approved by ODF. It goes straight to our GIS team to get updated on the data. We are working on a couple things I should mention as far as, so Ferns, like I said, uses that to do the notification piece. The data is available, the hydrography data, the streams is available for download on our website. That's not updated as frequently. We're also working on trying to produce a better online app that will be available to anyone as well. So that we have a current, little bit outdated. It's not outdated as far as the information, but that the format it's in is a little outdated. We're working on trying to update that to provide a better tool for someone who wants to map their stream online without going through a downloading process or not having the GIS software. So there is that available now, and I think it's on the same page. Kind of came out when we first did this work back in 2024. Our goal is to get a better, on a better platform there, so it's more useful, and helpful.
Thank you. Great job.
I didn't see any other hands up. If anyone has a question, just go ahead and speak up.
I'll just mention, yeah, I can send this, package up the PowerPoint and get to Heather. I think she can get it to the committee, for sure.
Well, again, that was excellent. Thank you too.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Thanks so much.
let's figure out, stop share.
We have a break scheduled. Josh, would be okay if we take a 5-minute break? They'll
Yeah.
make just a short break then instead of the longer one, and then come back like a little, like 11:07, say. Okay.
You have my
We're
thoughts,
taking a 5-minute break. Okay,
Okay, sorry.
we're waiting for Jake.
I think he's on.
Did you have a call?
Yeah.
That's an interesting.
We'll go ahead then. Thanks everyone for coming back. And Josh is next up for a presentation on S-Fish program.
All right, well, good to see everyone again. Most everyone knows who I am, but those who do not, I'm Josh Hansen. I work for ODF. I'm the S-Fish program coordinator. Let me get my get closer. And yeah, so I'm just back again today to talk to give some updates on S-Fish. But actually, what I'm going to end up spending the majority of my time today doing is actually, I'm going to go ahead and I know, Mike had hoped that I might actually have the time-lapse video project done by this meeting, but sorry to disappoint, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight another one of the projects that we did wrap up this fall, and but it'll just be a low-tech highlights through. Yeah, sorry to disappoint, but yeah, so I'll just give a couple updates on some of the things, or one of the things the program's been working on, which is an online application. But don't worry, I'll still have the analog ways for folks to apply, because yes, I'm well aware that not all small forest landowners, like to do business via technology. And then I'll just briefly chat about kind of where we're at with the possibility of entering in some new grant agreements this year in 26. So I'll just start off with the online application. And so, yeah, I've been working on this for a couple months now. Sent it out for some internal beta testing. I was hopeful that have it live here in January. We'll see if that actually happens. Had a few new things come onto the to-do list, but and yeah, so it'll just provide another alternative option for folks to apply, but they don't have to, right? They can still maintain the PDF application that they can just submit that paper form. Ultimately, that paper form will go into this, because this basically this it's just a Microsoft form, so it's super low tech really when it comes to like an actual portal but it creates essentially a initial database, right? And so everything will ultimately get funneled into here, whether it's the landowner actually entering it, or a stewardship forester entering it, or someone here and me entering it. It'll all end up kind of in the same spot, where right now I'm kind of everywhere, right? I got a couple flat files, I got PDF files, and so when I go to want to give an update on, well, how many applications do we have right now? It takes me a little bit to put that together, because I don't have it centralized, unfortunately. And that's where I indicate it's got a dashboard. So that's one of the great things, at least for me, and kind of being able to answer questions more quickly. I can be like, yeah, here's how many applications I have, and a few other little details that I can glean from it. And then one of the other benefits that I've outlined here is the way I've set up the form, that if the landowner or even the stewardship forester, whoever enters this and starts filling it out, it starts with a handful of kind of basic screening questions about, hey, how many acres do you own? How much is forest land? What's your harvest level? What have your harvest level been? So it gets, some of that basic screening stuff. It kind of helps that user determine if they're eligible or not. And then also it gets into some details and some questions about the project that they believe may be eligible, and they would like funding through the program, right? Well, not all of them are eligible. So it gets into, if he has a few targeted questions there that hopefully, it's not going to catch everything, right? But it will hopefully, answer just even some questions that the landowners may have if they just go and fill this out. Because what has happened in the first year or so is, if that landowner if their first point of contact isn't that stewardship forester, or maybe even me, they just go and they grab the application off, from the website, and they fill it out and they send it in. It's not a high percentage, but we definitely get some projects that just aren't eligible. And because they didn't go and, I don't blame them. They didn't go and read all the background information, the technical guidance, or whatever else we have available, right? They just went, oh, hey, yeah, I got a forest road and I got a problem, and this program says they'll help. They might help me with it, so they just fill it out. So hopefully it'll minimize a little bit of that, and not that that's a huge burden, but yeah. So hopefully provide a little bit of efficiency there as well with some kind of high level screening as they work through the application. All right. Moving on. Repeat slide. I didn't have a chance to update it. You all saw this slide last time I was here. Just to kind of start the quick discussion on kind of where we're at. You know, when I was here in September, I had 45 on the wait list, right? We've had, and this is where I wish I had my nice little dashboard because I had to go back and try and add this number up really quick to make sure I didn't miss anything. But it looks like since I was here last time, it's been pretty slow. We've had like 7 new applications, but so that would, you know, put us at 52. But I've actually had 2 landowners, 2 of these 45 that actually withdrew from the program. They've decided just because of the time lag and their needs, just didn't work for them. And so they just couldn't wait any longer. They couldn't wait for the funding, especially probably with some of the uncertainty that we were communicating. Obviously, that we shared that with them, helped them with their decision-making process. So they went ahead and had 2 landowners withdraw from the program and tackle the projects on their own with their own funding. I know one of them has been completed. They were actually able to get a little bit of assistance from some emergency funding that was available to Douglas County after the floods last spring. So the other landowner, I haven't checked in with them lately. I don't know what their timeline, if they've completed their project or not. But so yeah, still some good results. Unfortunately, the program wasn't able to help them, but they're still getting the job done that they need to get done. So $2 million, the appropriation, right? We talked about that last time. Thanks to Jennifer and the team she's been coordinating. They submitted the Habitat Conservation Plan and so it'll take permit at the end of December. So that will now allow us to engage with the governor's office, have some discussions around that $2 million and check some boxes with the governor's office and check some boxes administratively, internally. And then hopefully we will actually be able to award some grants this probably late spring, early summer. So ironically, we'll probably hit that same window just a little year late, right? So initially we were hopeful we would be giving out new grants in, late spring, early summer 25, but looks like fingers crossed they should be late spring, early summer of this year that we'll get some more dollars on the ground. So I am leaning, I have some shovel ready projects, a handful of those. And so considering prioritizing those just to try and stretch that 2 million a little bit further. Haven't made that decision yet, right? Still got to kind of think through what we have, and we'll also make sure we can award some new grants. But yeah, we may try and prioritize the shovel ready projects since the design stuff's already done, been paid for, and literally the project's already hit the ground. They just need implementation dollars. So we may take advantage of that, both to stretch the dollar, but also to get some work on the ground, quicker. All right. So the rest of the presentation, well, I'll go ahead and pause. Any questions on either the online application or the at least the tentative plans to get some new dollars on the ground this spring? Any questions on those before I jump into the highlighting this project that we just finished? No? All right. Don't see any online either. All right. So as I mentioned, unfortunately, we're going the wrong way.
Oh, we do.
Hey,
have a
Josh,
hand up.
I couldn't find my button fast enough. Just
Go ahead, Mike.
You probably said this. Is it too late for people to get their name on the list for a chance of this spring?
No, and that's kind of one of the things too. We're kind of weighing, we've had these new ones and actually I've been out to a couple landowners here recently and said, hey, let's get your application in now. Because, the timing would work to where we would just roll those into the ones that are already on the wait list and would consider their projects as well. So yes, Mike, if you run into landowners who may have something, tell them, yeah, you have to get a hold of ODF and get their application in and we'll get them into the this hopefully what will be our next cycle essentially. So for funding.
Okay, and obviously it had to be prioritized and all those things, but it's not too late if someone put their name in there.
Yeah, and so that's obviously if I get too many, we may have to reconsider new projects and consider just because if it pushes that timeline out to something that it's we're not going to be giving away money until till, late fall or the winter, right? We probably would just say, no, we'll just go with what we already have on the wait list. But I'm hopeful that I can get a few more anyways into the system, and we would have enough time to go through the prioritization of those and roll them into the current wait list and have that considered as well. So
Thank you.
let's see if I can start moving the right. Oh, we're going the right direction again. We're just a few slides behind now. All right. So yeah, I'm going to spend the rest of the time highlighting one of the projects that we just finished. Just really here, I think when they demoved, but it was late fall, and so it's a Tide Creek culvert replacement project. Tide Creek's tributary to the Lower Columbia River. The particular landowner ownership about 170 acres. It's a mix. It's a farm forestry operation. As you can see there in the forest community type on the left. So about 100 acres are forest land. The rest is more pasture, hay fields. But farm forestry operation, second generation. Really kind of their primary kind of management objectives right now are very much transitioning to more of a implementing more conservation measures, riparian plantings. So they do run cows, farm forestry operations, fencing, the riparian. So they've been working with NRCS, SWCD, some other agencies to implement those conservation measures. But also really kind of the broader goal is to address some of the legacy issues like this water crisis we're going to talk about, to really set up the next generation for maybe some fewer challenges for management of this property when it gets passed on to the next generation. Great landowner to work with, been super, just a lot of, I enjoy going out there and learning from the landowner, and then hopefully he enjoys learning from me too. Maybe he's not learning from me, I don't know. I think he is, maybe. So kind of those high level metrics, 15 and a half miles of habitat that's improved. This is a little bit unique in that the only species benefiting here are cutthroat trout, because this is a few miles above a natural barrier to anadromous fish. But obviously the miles of habitat for this project was a real driver in I can't remember where it ranked out, I think in terms of the first ranking, but really that volume of habitat above this site is really, it didn't have all these glamorous species, it had cutthroat only, but really, I mean, it's a large amount of habitat above this particular site. So that was one of the real drivers and one of the reasons it got funded through that first round of funding. What else did I want to touch on here? I think that probably hits it. We can jump on to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about, and I'll have the video, I have a short video next, and it really tells you what all this is telling you here. There was a lot of issues at this site, both from a fish passage perspective as well as just a failure risk at this site. So it's a site where moderate to higher flows, undersized pipes. You had multiple pipes. There was 4 of them. I'm sure they were added. Kind of talking with landowner, another pipe was added every couple of years type of deal. So you had a velocity barrier for fish at moderate to higher flows, and then at lower flows, you had perched pipes. So you had a jump barrier at the lower flows. So it wasn't a complete barrier because you didn't have these windows of time where fish could likely still pass through this site. But it also, multiple pipes undersized, had prone to plugging. So at times you also had physical barrier to fish. So a lot of issues for fish. And then you have from that risk of failure, prone to plugging, which is not good when you have a culvert because water's still got to go somewhere. And often it just goes right through the culvert fill, right, or finds another path. Undersized again and multiple pipes. And also you had water being conveyed directly through the fill outside the pipes. And so pretty much on an annual basis, the landowner was going down and filling in sinkholes in their culvert fill or their road prism over the culvert. So just a lot of issues at this particular site. And hopefully it'll play. And so this is just a photo of it. And you can only see 2 of the 4 pipes actually here. The one on the far left is actually a non-fish trib that comes down there. But yeah, so very problematic for fish passage, but also just pretty much a cobbled together poor design on this particular crossing. So what was that? This was the stewardship forester sent to me when the landowner applied. So I don't know exact date. No, this is a couple years ago. But they actually just had, so this is a site, Tide Creek, Lower Columbia, you know, with the atmospheric rivers that came through here recently. This is a site that, so this site, the new crossing went through those events and it held up just fine. And you'll see why. County is it? Columbia. Okay. Columbia County. All right. Next. This is just a real basic timeline for the project. Grant development was in the last 2 quarters of 24. I will mention, and one of the reasons I put that on there is, like I say, this landowner's been learned a lot from him. Been a pleasure to work with. But he was, and I give him a hard time all the time. He was the only landowner that we had to negotiate the grant agreement language with. So he does have a legal background, so that was probably part of it. But so it was it was a good learning experience for me. Of course, I got to play the middle person between, you know, our legal counsel and the landowner. But so this one did take a little bit longer to develop. And it was just really the landowner, you know, wanting language that made more sense to them, especially from a liability standpoint. So, and then of course, the bulk of the time was spent planning and designing the project. And it really is you know, this is something that at least the landowners, sure, there's some S-fish elements that maybe make this a little bit longer process than maybe if someone was just tackling this on their own. But the planning and design is a super critical part of the process when you're doing these water crossings and fish streams. But yeah, so it took the bulk of the time. And we had a few challenges that came up with this project. So that added a little bit to that timeline. But really that's often where the bulk of your time is spent and probably should be spent. And then as you can see, pretty short window for the construction, right? And I can't remember start to finish how many weeks it was, but yeah, we got that all done in this last quarter of 25. And then now in 26, technically we're going to leave the grant agreement open. We have another, you know, essentially terminates on its own, ends in next November. But we're going to go ahead and leave it open. We have a few little things we want. There's some significant change at this site. So we just want to make sure the stream is happy, the landowner's happy. And so we're going to go ahead and just leave it open. So technically it's done, but we're just going to leave it open. So in case something does pop up, that we still have pretty easy ability administratively anyways to potentially address any sort of minor issues that may arise here over the rest of this winter and the spring. So moving forward, maybe. So now we get to don't have a cool video, but so this is just a before after of the crossing. On the left is before, and then on the right obviously is the after. So we did consider, they did do one of the things that S-Fish requires is a design alternatives analysis. We don't ask for anything too grandiose, but we at least want the landowner and their engineers to consider some different options, somewhat from a cost perspective, but more so for S-Fish, kind of the way we wrote the policies for the program and the grant agreement language is we're emphasizing prioritization of something that is going to be really the best for fish and stream process, right? Which often is a clear span structure. So most S-Fish projects, especially this is a large, so even though it's a cut sort only, this is a large fish stream. It's not SSBT, but this is a large fish stream. So just made a lot of sense for this to be a clear span structure. Of course, they do cost more, and I'll show some prices here at the end. But yeah, so they did consider an open bottom culvert, but ultimately the landowner and the engineers decided to go with the clear span bridge, and so that's what we ended up with, and that's what you see on the right. And then this is just from the downstream end, not really comparable flows. Obviously, on the left, the before is at summer base flows, right? But actually, that was at the pre-construction meeting, the photo on the left. And then and these photos of the after are literally I took them Monday. So I was just up there Monday. And you can see
during the atmospheric river.
No, but you can see, I move back a slide, but you can kind of see, if you were to really get up there and look, you can actually see where that last flow event came up to. And it's, it came probably halfway up, well, at
You
least.
see like the, on the left, you mean up to
Yes.
the most stuff, yeah.
Yep, and even there and then on the left. So I mean, it was a large event. It's an event that probably would have historically, when you would get events like that, there's kind of a dip to the, I think it's to the north. And so often water, it would pond up behind and water would go out and around and go over the road and deliver, surface material from the road into the stream. And obviously threaten both the road and the crossing itself, but it doesn't do that now.
So is that the 100-year high water mark that you think of?
So no, it definitely, I don't know. I didn't look at, like the gauging data to see what
I
kind
don't
of
know
what's.
if you have a, like what it was yet.
But it definitely, so this is, and of course, it's based on modeling. So at a 100-year event, and we had to do a little, this is an interesting point that you bring up, Mike, or at least question, and at least an interesting discussion. So, the new rules require 3 foot of freeboard with clear span structures and a 100-year flood event, that water elevation. This one, we actually had to, or engineering justification. This particular site, at least based on the modeling, actually, you only have a little over a foot of clearance between that event and the bottom of the bridge. So we definitely, at least if the modeling is accurate, we weren't at the 100-year because we were still away from that. And I guess maybe just a little quick discussion on that. So that engineering justification, if you can't meet that 3 foot of clearance, you got to provide engineering justification as how you can still pass the expected amount of basically sediment and really large wood. And this is a site where, one, you don't have a ton of large woody debris in the system, but also two, which you can't see in those photos, upstream, there's a bit of a flat area, kind of a swampy flat area where often when you do have these higher flow events, most of your debris that you do get is going to rack up there. So it's not going to rack up on the bridge. And still, this is enough with that. You're just not, I don't say you're never going to have any issues with any sort of accumulation of woody debris, but it's going to be very, very rare. So, all right. And then, yes, so, it didn't show the dollar amounts. That's maybe a good thing. Sorry, I put this presentation together really quick last night. This is the shock of the price isn't hitting anyone yet because they don't know it. So this was an expensive project, and it definitely is an outlier. Obviously, our sample size is still pretty small for SFISH in terms of what the actual costs have been, but even as we add more projects and get more data on what costs actually are, this is still going to be an outlier. So this project cost almost $700,000. When we initially entered into the grant agreement, I did an estimate. I put it at about $300,000 based on the data I had. When we got the original conceptual designs from the engineers, they came actually just under 400,000. So I'm like, all right, I didn't do too bad, right? And so it's like, great, this is going to be easy, right? And well, as we got more into this and got some more information from the geology associated with the site, on the side of the stream where the excavator is, it was a long ways down to anything salt. Now, this side of the stream, there was good hard rock right there, right? So no big deal. But on the side where the excavator is, it was 40 feet down to anything solid. So that added structural engineering costs. And then the big one is they had to drive piles, all the way down to that. And so those quickly increased costs for this project. So that is the primary reason that this project ended up going well beyond even those initial conceptual level cost estimates of the engineer. Thankfully it doesn't happen all the time, but it does, and it did happen. So,
Josh, you kind of ask a quick question. You said switch to piling. Was that $300,000 increase mainly attributed to piles? That sounds like a lot.
So it was 100. Let's see. Basically, the labor and materials was around. I had this open last night. The structural engineering added $30K for the structural engineering element. And then, on the construction side, it was 150. It's probably not quite all that, right? If I break it down, but it was over 100K just on basically with materials and the labor for the piles. So it Yeah, it was a big, it helps, it explains most of the story as to why we saw the increase.
The original design was gonna be, some kind of just above it sitting on the ground.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So in your picture where you showed like that long center, I think it was a yellow section, the one that lasted a long, I'm curious of when the information landed about double cost.
Yeah.
It was even, because like, in terms of your initial agreement and who's liable for the additional cost and how you can come up with that money if you,
Yeah.
like, how did that work?
Yeah, so I had those emails up last night. They recognized it fairly early, right? It was after conceptual design,
Yeah.
but it was pretty early in the process. Because they had geotechs come out and survey and everything. And so, yeah, thankfully we were able to identify it pretty early on. So one of the things that we did when we made the award decisions in the late summer of 2024, we knew going in that my estimates, the data I was using, that there could be large differences between that and what the actual cost would be. So we left considerable contingency in terms of, we left money in the fund, right, in the SFISH fund to be able to cover these adjustments that we knew would be likely. And it was even, we had a lot of discussions, talked about a couple different strategies. We even had considered just doing like technical assistance and getting designs done before we committed implementation dollars. But administratively, it was easier just to start with a certain amount, and then we can, as long as I have the money, I can fairly easily do a budget modification. It's not a huge administrative hurdle as long as we have the money there. So we just left contingency in that space fund. And I was hopeful that we wouldn't see big movements like this in terms of cost, and that we would have enough left from that initial 6.67 to do a couple more projects. And we still might, the jury's still out on that, but yeah, this was definitely one that we missed the mark on, but there's, we can easily explain why we missed it. But yeah, this was even for me, it kept being a sticker shock each time. So, and I think that's it. Unless we got more questions. And sorry, I didn't have the exact, I thought the dollar amounts were on there, and I think this would happen to throw it together late. So.
Questions? We can't see everyone's hands, so if you have something to add, please go ahead and speak up.
It'd be interesting to do a cost per stream mile.
So you want to know what it is on this one?
Yes.
Compare it to other
I did.
projects.
It's basically 45,000 per mile, right? And I tried to find like a national average, right? But there was very limited data out there, and it was a big range. And I think too, on that national average, it probably includes dam removal, and so it's like kind of fish patches in general, right? So yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't find at least a quick reference of kind of like, hey, how does this compare to other work that's being done out there? But I will say that these things are not cheap. They're only going to continue to get more expensive. But it's also, there's at least early data that I'm getting is like, I see significant variation between counties here in the state of Oregon in terms of what cost is. Most of the stuff that we're doing down in Douglas County, we're doing clear span, similar type projects, not including the piles, but for under 400,000. But I get up here, I have the project where we did the time lapse, very similar project to this, but we didn't have to do pilings there, and it's an outlier from what it's cost us down in Douglas County. So I think there's that effect too. So I think SFISH will see a wide variation in costs, just simply where we're implementing. So yeah.
So are you part of the team that decides what projects move forward? I'm thinking like it's essentially a grant application. So you send this out into the netherworld and someone looks at it. So that's kind of part one. And then part two, do you go, when you're looking at things, I've only got so much money I can only take so many projects. If projects cost less, I can do more of them. What kind of gets more weight?
Yeah.
this is gonna be straightforward, or, oh, wow, the bang for the buck on this, like 15 miles, that's a lot.
Yep.
What ends up holding more weight? And
Yeah.
I'm thinking in terms of talking to landowners.
Yeah.
as they
Yeah.
discuss.
So the prioritization is, it's very much, and I think I've probably even discussed it here before, but it's very much a formula-based prioritization. So, and that formula is almost, it is very much weighted by what's the benefit to fish.
Okay,
That is very much the driver. It's not, but we do also, it does go through a committee review. So there's some additional things that like efficiencies, that may be achievable, because really that comes down to, hey, what other work's been already done in or around this particular place we may invest money, or what additional work is going to be done either by that land or an adjacent lander. So we are taking into those things into account as well. But really it's driven by that benefit, because the purpose of the program is to improve conditions for fish on land owned, forest land owned by small forest land owners. So fish are the drivers of what gets funded. I consider cost benefit because it's something, that it is important. But one of the things we don't have is we don't have a cost estimate for these projects, right? When in terms of how the workflow is right now, we don't have that, other than me using some data to kind of get an idea on what the cost. And I do give an estimate on what I think the cost will be to that review committee. I don't tell them to score based on cost benefit, but it's at least something there that if they choose to kind of have that influence, how they score the other metrics or the matrix that they use, that's their choice if they want to have that bias, I shouldn't say, but influence how they score the project. So it's not ignored, but it's definitely not, it is not a driver in terms of how we make our decisions or how the program makes the decisions for what gets funded and what doesn't. It's the fish.
Dave?
So thanks. So great job, Josh, as usual. So two things. One is, I think the slide to me that stands out the most is the one early on that showed the dwindling amount of funding available for this program. And I think it needs to be put in perspective how, to me, sad that is that, I think if I recall correctly, originally S-Fish was hypothesized or theorized, to be funded at about $10 million. And then right out of the box, it got whacked to 6.67 million or whatever. And then this most recent one down to 2 million. And so I'm just wondering if, to me, this is basically part of the PFA, and it's basically a promise that the state of Oregon and its voters made to small forest landowners that, hey, we understand you're taking there's a compromise here in the, in what small forest landowners are giving up in exchange for the benefits of the PFA, part of which is that that folks would be getting these benefits through stream crossings, partially or completely funded by S-Fish. And so the bottom line of my question is that, if you draw a trend line, pretty soon you're not going to have any money. And so I'm just wondering if there's a move afoot to impress upon legislators the importance of this program, and that it really needs to be, the funding needs to be restored to the level at which it was, at least out of the blocks, if not what was originally promised. Because if you have $15 to $20 million in projects waiting, you're never going to get there unless you get some, rich uncle you never knew that's going to give you a bunch of money. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you. I can comment a little, right? I guess I think I'm safe to say this last time around, we couldn't ask, right, when it came to S-Fish, right? So that was one of the big differences on this last budget cycle, right? We just couldn't ask. And so I guess in some ways I'm thankful that we got something. The other point I would make, Washington, similar program up there, right? It's, not only is the HCP model kind of after theirs, this program is very much modeled after their, 3F 2Ps program or whatever it is, forest, anyway, Forest Fish Passage program. But, and I think they've been I haven't looked at their numbers in a while, but in general, I think they've been getting maybe 4 million a year. It's probably even less than that on average. And they have, an 800 project wait list. So I guess that, even if we were to get the 10 million annually, which is actually how the PFA was written, or even 10 million biannually, folks are still gonna have to wait, and they're still gonna be waiting a while. That's just reality. But yeah, we're digging a pretty deep hole pretty quickly, Dave. I won't draw a trend line with only 2 points. But maybe when I get a third point, then I'll draw that trend line. But yeah, so that's, I don't know, Mike, if you have anything to add to that. I hope that didn't give them that long.
That's kind of what it is. So hopefully, yeah, we've got the money, the
2 million.
2 million.
Yeah,
coming.
2 million.
So, I say this, so you do, your point is well taken, Dave. And so, as a state agency, like Josh was saying, we can't advocate for that, but, you could have others do that for you, I guess, is the best way to fund it. So, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, one thing I'll mention is that the Washington plan, they did a 20-year report, and one of the main points in their 20-year report was that the SFISH equivalent was underfunded and in great demand, with many good proposals coming forward. So this was a problem that also has happened in Washington state, and I haven't heard any updates on whether they've figured out a way to improve that. But the paring away of the finances really is troubling, and since there's a limitation on the departments being able to do anything, maybe it's just this community needs to keep speaking up. Yeah.
Well, and just to follow up on that, I think 2 things quickly is that, one, if there's a way, and this is obviously, like you just said, outside the jurisdiction of ODF, but if there's a way that us as a community, small SFO community, can impress upon our legislators like Mike, this should be something, Caffaretta, that we should talk about in the upcoming GAT meeting. But, I think that would be important. But also, maybe there's a way to recognize that there are multiple other sources. I mean, being involved with our local basin council, I've written grants through the ODFW PFA mitigation fund and have been successful there. I've written grants through the OWEB small grant and large and restoration program. So there's other mechanisms in place, and maybe we just need to make landowners aware and help and create a process by which they can at least try to piggyback some of this money to get some of these very worthwhile projects done. I mean, I would hate to see some big government project that has minimal impact get funding over something like what you just showed, Josh. I mean, 15 miles or whatever it was of stream restoration or of access now provided is huge. I mean, that is a huge amount of access that I rarely see. And so I just think we need to put our heads together to make folks know, A, there's other funds out there. B, we need to advocate to make sure the legislature doesn't legislate this away. So, yeah.
David, one thing since we've been in this holding pattern with SFISH, I have been, making sure landowners are aware of the PFA grant program. Although we do prefer, and this is just more of kind of a policy discussion between, that program and SFISH, we do prefer if a landowner is a small forest landowner and they have a project that's eligible for SFISH, that's where we want them to come first. But obviously we don't have any money. Okay. So I don't know if any of them ended up applying for a PFA grant, but we definitely, I definitely made them aware of that and even offered to assist, to some amount in terms of, even helping draft some of the elements of the grant proposal or whatever it was. But as you know, I mean, the PFA grant is definitely a much bigger, and as well as OWEB or any others out there, much bigger lift, right, than what SFISH is for the landowner. But if they get partnered up with the watershed council or something like that, it is a potential possibly a practical solution for them to get funds. I've been trying to track as best I can some of the federal dollars that are out there, but they just aren't out there right now. When it comes down to it, I've even tried to engage directly with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on their National Fish Passage program, but I just haven't gotten any feedback from them. So I am looking for some alternative funding strategies or pots of money for whether it's for SFISH directly or indirectly and or, directly to that landowner through another grant program. So
I might be remembering wrong, but I thought there was a rule that was something like if you wanted to do operations on your land, you had to have a certain level of compliance as to your roads and culverts, and that if you can't get your culverts into compliance yourself, you get a priority grant from SFIsh or something? Is there something like that?
yes and no. I mean, so one of the, yes, in the rules that they, it says that, hey, if you sign up for, if you have an eligible you're an eligible landowner, you have an eligible project, and you enroll in SFIsh, that you can continue to use that, that road or that water crossing. Generally, it's going to be water crossing with SFIsh, but there are some just road related projects that we can fund, but that you can continue to use that road for your forest management purposes, without ODF saying, no, you can't because of A, B, C, or D, right?
Right.
Unless damage is occurring, right? If that's a whole nother, but yes, it does kind of get you off the hook. And then it obligates the state of Oregon to pay for that water crossing replacement or that road improvement. Yeah. So, it's how the rule is written. It's kind of like, well, do I have to do this or do I not? That's a little bit different discussion, right?
Okay.
But yeah. So.
Yeah.
And
So we
Josh,
can't
if I
advocate-
might chip in there, and Oswald does support SFIsh and other type programs, definitely part of our program to do that. The stories help us a lot. So I think even handicapped a little bit by that last session, by not really having, and maybe it's partly our fault, but not really having a good grip on the success stories to be able to sell getting more. And so I know this time we do have a good summary of what's been done, and those pictures of Tide Tree could be helpful. But that helps us a lot, is being able to show success and then asking for more based on that success.
Well, and piggybacking on that, Mike, would be success and then some of the good work that could be done that's being held up because there isn't that funding. Because there's both the success story, this is what we can do, but there's also this is what we can't do that could have been a success story. So I think having both of those could be really useful for the next session.
It seems to me that, like, again, this is such a complicated area, but it seems to me that this is a program that focuses on small forest landowners. To a certain extent, like dollars allocated to private forest accord, like small forest landowners are competing with the mitigation grant program, which is for all landowners. So because there's been this focus on like resilience, restoration, and thinning, essentially fuel loads, to a certain extent, you can see monies going over to the non-small forest landowner thinning projects instead of these SFIsh projects, which go to small forest landowners as promised and have a really big bang for their buck in terms of the species goal of the HCP. So I hate to see this project dwindle.
So we can't advocate, but I'm offering up Josh to help you tell the story.
Yeah.
Happy to
Perfect.
help, more than
Yeah.
happy to help. And I know even the last session, Oswa, reached out, and I was more than happy to provide information to help tell the story about the program. And again, we have much more to tell now, and I guess, proof that we can be successful and deliver projects, and that we are spending the money that was originally appropriate.
Yeah. It was a very good poster child presentation. It was excellent. Yeah.
I think just to close this out, I just, as a structural engineer and doing this for 40 years, I can tell you that the cost of this stuff never goes down. And so to see it is a trend line. You got 3 points. You got your 10 million, 6.67, 2 million. I'm concerned. Whereas cost of construction always outpace the cost of inflation. And so always. And so, for example, I did a larger project than what you showed there with Pacific Bridge. That looks like they were or a similar type clone product. And that was over a county road, and that was only $300,000, and that was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing a project like this. Of course, subtract the piling, to make apples to apples, you're still in the, say, $600,000 range. So it's almost doubled in the span of 8 years. And so I think people the legislators in particular, need to bear this in mind, that to see dwindling funds and increasing costs isn't a recipe for success. So.
Well, last call for any questions. Thanks for my webinars. Great discussion. I mean, it's really good to talk about this. Anyone else? Or shall we just say thank you? Thank you and applause. Thank you so much, Josh.
And I'll have the time lapse video next time.
That's
That and
Go ahead, ready.
stream maps that we get that landowners can access, that'd be good too. Yeah.
No promises.
Okay, it's not easy.
I'm not in charge of some of this.
Right,
Help.
but that's actually, I mean, that's kind of being able to access that information. For those of us that don't have sexy enough fish.
I'm looking at the, I think we can perhaps just have our discussion of term expirations and committee succession during roundtable, if that's okay with other people, since it's 6 minutes of 12 right now. Is that all right with people if we break for lunch a few minutes early and we come back at 1 o'clock? The virtual people rejoin us. We have lunch meanwhile, and then we'll have the Board of Forestry update from Ben, and then after that, we can talk about committee succession. Okay? All right. Thanks all. We'll see you in an hour and 5 minutes.